Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm your host Miss KK and this is The Wave. If you are new here, thank you very much. Welcome to The Wave. It is your weekly show that looks at topics related to personal, family and business finance. And our hope is that by the time we get to the end of this conversation, you are really better equipped to make sound financial decisions. And if you're already a returning subscriber, an awesome appreciation. Today we are back with the three-part series, and this will be part one, and it is about money topics you should be discussing with your family. This is inspired by an Instagram poll I ran sometimes 2 weeks ago, where I asked whether you are currently discussing financial matters with your family, and less than half of the respondents said they actually are doing so. Some people haven't started but are planning, and for others it's a bit awkward to start that topic. So today we will do part one. So part one will be why it's very important to have this conversation about money with your family. Part two would be the 5 top topics you should be discussing with your family. And part three will really just guide you into how to have that conversation with your family, because we do know that, especially in an African setting, money is hardly spoken of. It is sometimes considered as a taboo, and therefore it's an awkward topic that you need to get over that hurdle to just actually get into that momentum. So we'll just look into some strategies on how to get that conversation going. So the reason why a lot of people don't really talk about money is because sometimes it's considered rude to ask people about their financial affairs, or it just feels inappropriate for you to ask someone about their financial affairs. Sometimes we really just don't know how people make, and we don't know if the conversations that we are having is actually appropriate for the income level that other people are making. So sometimes you may be making more than them, and then you have conversation at your income level, and people may feel like you're undermining them, or it could be vice versa, where you feel like someone is showing off because they think they make a lot of money and everyone have access to the same opportunity. So it's really that uncertainty of where do I fit in the income range that stops a lot of people from having this conversation. And sometimes you are protecting your perceived status. We do know that a lot of our families, especially back in rural Namibia, they have a perception of how much we make. Even also just in an urban setting, we have this perception of how much people make, either where they work or the car they drive, the neighborhood they live. Then we have this perception they might be making X amount of money. And because we know there's that expectation, we are trying to protect that societal expectation. So we don't even want to open up about our true affairs of our finances, because it is jeopardizing, and we are also exposing ourselves to judgment. People might think we were making it up, even if they are the ones that actually created this perception. And lastly, it is sometimes just sticking to how you are raised. You may have grown up in a household where people don't talk about money. You never know how much your parents make. You never know when they were struggling or when they had a lot. So you're really just sticking to what you know, and therefore you are avoiding the conversation entirely. But then, despite all of that, what are some of the benefits that really can come out of having these conversations with your family? Sometimes it is then leading to informed decisions, especially like this is the primary reason why I started this channel. So hoping that by the time we really get to this end of this conversation, we've spoken about so many things, you leave this place better off than you came from, and you can actually go and make an informed decision with a little bit of knowledge that you didn't have. And also, having this discussion about money, you let in your close relatives and friends on the plans that you have, and they might give you wise counsel. Let's just take a typical example. You may be buying a particular house for an X amount of income, but telling a close family member, perhaps a parent or a sister or a friend, they might advise you whether that's a little bit pricey, or they might give you some other factors to consider before you make that decision that you wouldn't have otherwise considered if you were to just make that decision in isolation. And lastly, it prepares you for the ups and downs. So if you're already used to speaking about finances with your families, with your friends, you are ready to handle the turbulences. Let's just take a typical example. When COVID came around, a lot of people didn't expect to get salary cuts. A lot of people didn't expect to, have medical bills that are out of control. A lot of people didn't expect to get laid off. So if they would never had these conversations about money with their friends and family, it becomes difficult to start that conversation when you are in the situation, because you are already dealing with emotions, you are dealing with the stress. So to add money aspect to it with its awkwardness, it might actually just not come around. All right. So really, that is why we are talking about this conversation today. And when we say discussing finances with your family, you need to define who your family is to you and who your target audience really is for this conversation. You can't go about speaking about money to everyone and everybody that you know. You need to choose the people that you want to speak to, especially those that will have a material impact in your life. So we are speaking about spouse, if you're possibly married, or a long-term partner, if you are maybe in a living arrangement. We are talking about parents and siblings. We are also possibly talking about children, if you have any, and we are also talking about extended members. And because there are different, family dynamics that we are dealing here, you need to decide which one is most important to you. For some people, they only need to deal with one or two of these groups. For other people, we need to deal with the whole dynamics. So we need to make sure that the conversation that we are really having is age appropriate and it's audience appropriate. You can't go discuss your inheritance with extended family members if it doesn't concern them, for example. Or you can't go discuss your living arrangement, your parents' living arrangement with your friends if that doesn't have anything to do with them. So make sure that you are selecting your target audience and you're having age appropriate conversations. So let's now look at the key reasons why it's important to have these conversations with the various groups of family members that we've actually identified here. And number one is your spouse. So what are some of the primary reasons why you should have this conversation about money with your spouse? So on top of my list is that we all know that money is considered to be a lot of the primary source of conflict in many marriages. It also is one of the contributors to the high rate of divorce that we have in the country, and therefore you can't really just ignore it. You can't wait for the problem to arise before you address it. You need to know that it can potentially cause a conflict in your marriage. It can cause a rift in your marriage. Therefore, you need to be prepared to talk about this before the conflict arises. You also are coming from different backgrounds. That's why it's very important to get your money aspects together, iron out your money values, iron out any money myths that you have, and also iron out different spending patterns and investment patterns that may have that is likely to drive you guys apart. And lastly, it is around death. Death is an eventuality. One of you guys would depart first and the other person will be left to deal with whatever is left. So it's very important to just have conversation around what would happen when one of you guys is no longer here and what are some of the money implications that will be involved in that event. So it's very, very important to have this discussion with your spouse if you aren't having it already. Number two, we are talking about parents and siblings. So we need to speak to our parents about money, especially when they're aging, because there's a lot of events or consequences that comes with age, right? So for a lot of parents, if they are going into retirement, we just have to pick up this conversation, maybe have a discussion around what they plan to do with their retirement money, if they're having any, what are their living arrangement post-retirement, especially when they get to that age where they no longer can take care of themselves, because there may be expectation that one of the siblings might have to take over the care of the parent. They might have to move the parent to an old age home. You might have to get a caretaker for your parents. So all of this really involves money, and therefore it's very important to have this discussion with your parents when they are aging. And also, some of our parents are actually running family business. For example, my mother runs a cooker shop. So this is very important to have this conversation to say, if my mother is no more tomorrow, who is going to take over the cooker shop? Because we don't want now, only after the death of the parent, you are trying to determine who is interested in the cooker shop. And that's why a lot of black businesses dies with the owner, because there is just no succession planning. So it's very important when there's a family business to have this conversation. So there's succession planning to allow for the business to continue beyond the parents being in alive. And lastly, we also would like to know what the wishes are around inheritance. So as siblings, you all need to know what is expected from you or what is going to be given to you. Your parents might not let you in the nitty-gritties of their will, but at least an overview of what would happen and what their wishes are when they die would be very important. That is why really it's important to have this conversation with your parents, including your siblings if you have any, so that everyone is on the same page and you're not scratching each other's throats and necks when your parents are no more, when you're also trying to deal with grief and loss. And we have the next category, which is kids. Kids are a very interesting category. I was actually speaking to a friend yesterday. She was checking up on me and just asking something about life, and she said her daughter asked her what she must let her know how to make money when she gets to grade 12. And she's like, I was quite surprised, because maybe it's because I listened to your YouTube videos and she's around and she's picking some of this knowledge up. And I actually realized that as parents, we have the primary responsibility to shape our kids' myth and values around money. So it's very important to have this discussion with your kids, so that they can, draw from your wisdom, learn from your values, so that ultimately they can choose which one to uphold and take with when they're grown up, and also just learn about money. We also need to enlighten them about family's aspect, especially when they are old. They need to know about the family's assets, the family's responsibility, and especially when they're getting old again, inheritance comes in here, because you need to speak. And as much as kids, we need to speak to our parents. Our parents also need to speak back to us about those inheritance, so that our expectations are as close as possible to reality. And lastly, we live in a materialistic world, and the kids are exposed to so much peer pressure that's come from TVs, their friends, and the community at large. So as a parent, it's up to you to make sure that you're shaping your kids' perception about money. You are not letting your kids influenced by peer pressure. You are not letting your kids give in because they're trying to accumulate wealth or materialistic things that their friends have. And you're just making sure that the pressure that comes with all of that does not affect their mental well-being. That's why it's very important as a parent to have this conversation with your child. Obviously, make it age appropriate. The younger they are, keep it basic. The older they get, then you can get to the real conversation around aspects of money. And lastly, it is the extended family members. In an African context, this really just resolves around black tax. So really just having this conversation about expectations, about boundaries, so that the people don't take advantage of you, they don't take too much. And when you are trying to say no, they understand that you're not being selfish, but really just trying to respect your boundaries and trying to give within your means. So that is the reason why we should be speaking about money to our families, especially in the different categories. So lastly, I just want to end off here with what you should be taking away from this conversation. So I want you to think and just reflect on who you need to speak about money, who you haven't spoken to about money in the longest of time, and also just reflect, is there maybe an event that is likely to happen in your life that might put pressure or stress on you if you don't pick up this conversation as soon as possible? There are certain conversations you can delay 2-3 years from now, 2-3 months from now, but there are certain conversations you must have now to plant that seed. So as we are at the beginning of the year, remember the beginning of the year is when everyone's on high energy, everyone is making resolutions. So I just want you to include conversation about money with your family this year. Until next time, it is goodbye, and let's look forward to part 2 when we discuss my 5 top topics. It just started raining now, so the sound in the background. My 5 top topics, what we should be discussing with our families regarding money, and we'll close off in the last episode with how to approach those money conversations. So until next time, it is goodbye, and please keep safe.